.hack Mutation is the second installment in the 4-part JRPG series released in September of 2002, just 3 months after Infection. This entry adds precious little in terms of assets, gameplay, mechanics, etc. I want to qualify that statement by saying that you shouldn't view each subsequent game in this series as a sequel. It's more appropriate to see these games as one comprehensive title that spans multiple discs, similar to one of the later Final Fantasies toward the end of the PlayStation 1's lifespan. The fact remains, though, that each part did get a separate release. We can't just ignore that completely, and the reality forces us to ponder whether perhaps the devs should have taken more time between games to make some more substantial improvements. The facts being what they are, it is understandable that not much has changed in the 3 months between Infection and Mutation, but that's also a serious strike against the series. You literally don't have time to make significant updates or improvements in that very short time frame. That being said, I was actually very impressed with the updates that did take place. As I said in my Infection review, these games are repetitive and require a lot of grinding and dungeon crawling. From the way you progress the story to the flow of combat, everything is pretty monotonous, and honestly not much changes between the first and second installments. This is not ideal because even the major boss battle at the end of Infection suffered from this. Sure, Skaith had an arsenal of unique skills that presented new and interesting problems to account for during combat, but our response remained unchanged. Hit him a lot, data drain, and then hit him a lot again. Boss battles should feel different. We should understand by their very makeup that the stakes are dramatically higher and that we can't just rely on the familiar to get us through them. Mercifully, the team adds some improvements in this department in Mutation. We can't just whack at least 2 of the 3 big bosses ad infinitum until our data drain opportunity. The boss battle with Kubiya incorporates a core that we have to defeat and peripheral enemies that can heal the core, cast buffs and debuffs, and deal damage to us to hinder our progress. On top of this, Kubiya switches back and forth between magic and physical invulnerability. These added layers make for a much more interesting and demanding boss battle than previously experienced, and it provided a nice surprise to boot. My only complaint with Kubiya is that he literally just switches back and forth between the 2 invulnerabilities. This might have worked better if it were truly random. The boss battle with Magus also adds some interesting improvements with the little leaves that the main boss sheds from his body. I made the mistake of ignoring them at the start of the battle. Little did I know these were time bombs that could potentially inflict fatal amounts of damage if not taken care of. Found that out the hard way, and after licking my wounds, I changed up my strategy and split my attention between defeating those leaves before they created a larger issue and dealing damage to Magus. With the implementation of these small adjustments to the makeup of these boss battles, the repetitive flow of combat was successfully and delightfully disrupted. Whether they're turn-based or real-time, JRPGs often suffer from repetitive battle systems, and Mutation throws some really smart wrenches into 2 climactic boss battles to stave off the monotony. Aside from this, we also get grunty racing in Mutation. Yay. As much as I love the different types of grunties you can breed, as well as their hilarious personalities, grunty racing is awkward and frustrating. During my playthrough, I made the comparison to Chocobo racing in Final Fantasy VII. How could I not? It's another JRPG where you breed pets and then race them, and if I'm making this comparison, you can bet scores of other players will too. And the most embarrassing thing about this, in my opinion, is that Final Fantasy VII did a better job and it came out 5 years prior. I mean, the Chocobos you raced had stamina meters, and you could do typical racing things like, oh, I don't know, accelerate and slow down. You get none of that with grunty racing. The whistle blows and then you just go. Honestly, this came off as a bit half-assed, and if it wasn't for the really good stat-boosting items you can get, I wouldn't have even bothered. And it's such a shame because, again, clearly a lot of thought and effort went into the grunties themselves. They are all delightful and hilarious, except Noble Grunty. Fuck you, mon ami! And now I want to touch on my favorite part of this whole series, the writing. We see some really good writing in Mutation that expands on what we got in Infection and also establishes a much clearer link to .hack sign. Let's tackle these in order. We see some excellent character development with our principal characters, especially Black Rose. In the beginning of Mutation, we learn that someone close to her has also fallen into a coma from playing the world, and presumably this is a major reason why she has decided to join Kite on his quest for answers. In the return to Theta chosen hopeless nothingness at the beginning of Mutation, the keywords for the final dungeon in Infection, we see a scene between Kite and Black Rose where she admits with a little too much detail that she's terrified. But the writers convey this with more than just lines of dialogue. In a move similar to the scene at Hallgrons in Infection, Black Rose puffs herself up to overcompensate for her fear, and then completely gives in to said fear when Kite points out a very minuscule, non-threatening abnormality. She even uses some of the same lines from that earlier scene as a bit of a nod that we should connect this scene to that earlier one. The team uses not only words but also her body language to at once harken back to that scene at Hallgrons and simultaneously offer us deeper insight into Black Rose's vulnerable headspace in the present. The team clearly knows how to make lifelike characters that just resonate and also how to effectively develop them. Absolutely brilliant. We also see some really interesting development in terms of Kite's illegal skill that has the power to save or destroy, depending on how it's used. In Infection, we spent a lot of time ignoring the admins stationed in protected areas so that we could find the truth and hopefully rid the world of whatever virus is causing players to become comatose. In Mutation, we continue this work, at first with the apprehensive approval of Leos, the head system administrator, and later in direct defiance of his orders to not step another toe out of line. And I love the nuance here. We have our team, who are the quote-unquote good guys, and then we have the system administrators who are in direct opposition to us, even threatening to delete our character data, Balmung, who has a distrust for anything outside of the system, and Helba, who uses similar unsanctioned methods to probe the fabric of the system to offer help and find answers. With the presence of all of these parties who essentially want the same outcome, we quickly come to realize that whatever is happening to the world and its players is not black and white. It's not as simple as slaying the dragon and rescuing the princess. The more we tamper with the system in an attempt to purge it of the virus, the more things start to unravel, and Mutation concludes with us witnessing the horror that we have unwittingly wrought upon the world and its players that we were so desperately trying to save. These developments in and of themselves are really well executed in this game, but they do an even better job of positioning us for the next game in the series, Outbreak. But here's the really impressive part. We can see the foreshadowing in all of this, with Black Rose's first email to us at the beginning of Mutation. Quote, "I thought once we got the thing with the red wand, everything would be solved. It was baseless, but I thought everything would be back to normal. What did we do? Was what we did right? I'm not wrong, right?" End quote. This email, it turns out, pulls a lot of weight in terms of setting the tone for this entire portion of the series. Are we the good guys that we thought we were? And more importantly, are we responsible for the problems we create while trying to find the solution? I live for shit like this. My biggest complaint about this story is something that happens relatively early on. We have a scene with Mia where her speech input is on the fritz. According to Elk, this happens shortly after Skaith is defeated, around the time where many of the other players report some kind of audio abnormality. We get one scene referencing this and have one quest pertaining to the problem, then we hear nothing more about it. Now, I've played all 4 games before, so I know we will learn more about this in Outbreak, but the writers do not do a good enough job of establishing this as a significant and curious issue. Not gonna lie, I pretty much forgot about it by the end of Mutation. Good thing I'm writing a review and going back over all of my footage. But yeah, this should have been handled better. Kinda a disappointing miss considering all the excellent writing going on around it. I think my favorite thing about the writing of Mutation is that this is the entry where the team starts to do much of the legwork in terms of connecting IMOQ to .hack sign. At several points in the game, if we pay Hallgrons a visit, we get some relevant flashbacks from .hack sign. We also have a couple quests where we encounter characters from that series like A20 and Mimiru. These scenes work nicely in a couple of ways. First and foremost, they add intrigue. Who are these special figures before us? What is their significance to the world? And why are they appearing before Kite at the most intriguing and central location in all of the world? We have to start asking these questions, but we will only begin to answer them in Mutation. But these scenes work well in encouraging us to consider how the events that unfold in .hack sign connect to what's happening now in IMOQ. As we start to superimpose IMOQ's plot over .hack signs, over .hack liminalities, over Emma Whelan's writing of the Epitaph of Twilight, things begin to crystallize. And in order to understand the complex web, we must look at the parallels and similarities. These are intentional, and the writers do an amazing job of using these as the basis for the connections they make between the various .hack franchise content. This honestly wouldn't work without all the parallels. We would just at best have a bunch of related storylines that all contribute toward a larger .hack universe. Kinda like the Star Wars Expanded Universe, or whatever the fuck is going on with the fetid, corpulent mass that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the parallels, Tsukasa Maha and Elk Mia, Mimiru and Black Rose, Crimson Knight and Balmung, Tsukasa and Kite for that matter. The fact that history repeats itself so pointedly in this universe over and over causes resonances between the different series that are impossible to ignore and go a long way toward making this grand, sweeping narrative cohere. All in all, Mutation is an excellent follow-up to Infection. We have some small, but very crucial improvements to the boss battles that shake up the otherwise monotonous experience, and while the grunty racing addition is disappointing, once again, just like Infection, the storytelling is where this game really shines.